Hey loves, I haven't done a reading wrap up for a little while, so I thought I would change that today and go through all of the books that I read in January. I was not expecting to read so much in January. I've been on a mission to try to live a more balanced life and really prove to myself that you can have both like a healthy and fulfilled life as well as career success. So I did dedicate a lot of time to reading in January. I read 8 books, which is actually quite a lot for me. So let's just dive right into it. Some of these books I still have physical copies of, but not all of them because I already lent a few out. And then some of them I did listen to on Audible or read on my e-reader. So the first book that I finished in January was The City in Glass by Nevo. I honestly had no idea that this book was going to be the way that it was. So it is based on like mythology, which I usually like books about mythology, but this was an interesting one. This book talks about a demon that falls in love with the city and kind of makes it her life work to really try to like build up the city, help the people flourish. But of course she has her like demon qualities as well. And she's kind of causing mischief and, kind of like playing her part in these people's lives. One day, a family of angels descend from the skies and lay the city to ruins. I guess because it was just time for the city to go, or, I don't know why angels do things, but she is devastated and she's like, just going through like decades of sorrow and pain that her city has been destroyed. Right before the angels left, though, she did curse one of the angels right in his chest, right where his heart is. And that angel, because of that curse, isn't able to like ascend back to the heavens and leave with this family. So he ends up having to stay on Earth. Because they're angels and demons and they're immortal, you do go through like, I don't know, a century or something worth of time. Because when they're talking about time, she'll say stuff like, I banish you for 50 years. And so you're like, okay, wait, 50 years is a lot of time. But you are kind of living through their lives, so that time goes by really quickly. What surprised me about this book is I guess their love story, kind of. It was just a bit of an odd book. But then again, you are reading about angels and demons, so I can't really expect them to see romance or love or emotions the way that we do as humans. I will say the ending was just the most bizarre thing ever. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Read it if you find like mythological books and, angels and demons interesting. But yeah, it was definitely a slow burn. Much of the book is just talking about her sort of like rebuilding the city and getting over her heartbreak and the role that the angel that she cursed plays in this whole process. It was just interesting. That was the best way that I can describe it. But I mean, I did speed through that book, so clearly I found something about it intriguing. But yeah, that was book 1. The second book I read was Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. I have been trying to finish the Throne of Glass series for like 2 years now. So at this point, I really just wanted to like get her done. Like I wanted to just finish the series so that I can move on. Not saying that it wasn't good, because I really enjoyed the assassin's like story and the fairy stories and like, the whole world that she built in Throne of Glass, but it was just so long. And for some reason, it wasn't one of those series that I just wanted to like sit down and like crush through the entire like 7 or 8 books that there are. It took me a while, but I did really enjoy this one. I would say I give the overall series like a 3.5 or 4 stars, probably closer to 4 stars. It was really good. I loved the premise of the story. It talks about Selena, who is an assassin, a world-renowned assassin, and has been since a very young age, and kind of her journey in this fantasy world as she discovers her place, as she uncovers, or I guess when other people uncover her history, her relations to fairies, how she's going to combat the evil and the dark magic in the world. It does have that very kind of like classic high fantasy excitement and political drama, but I think the selling point is definitely Selena. Like she's just amazing. She has all these incredible stories and skills, and her history is just like so And her history is just like so interesting. And her character arc, I think, does really well in the book as well, because she's nowhere near perfect. Okay. This girl is human. She is making mistakes. She is betraying loved ones. She is going through the motions of life. And I think that is what I enjoyed most about this series. But yeah, it was just a little bit long. There is a lot that happens in this 7 or 8 book series. But I did end up really enjoying it. I am really glad that it's over, which is like an odd feeling to feel, because usually when a series I love ends, I'm like, oh, just so sad. Like I'm losing friends or something. But this one, I'm like, okay, yeah, like I've read enough about you guys. I'm happy with the way things are. Like, go on and live your lives without me. The third book that I read was actually an ARC, an advanced reader copy that was sent to me by the publisher, which is still so exciting to say out loud, but it was Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Huang. I loved Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang that I read last year. I think that she just has such an interesting like perspective and writing style. It is very dark and twisted. There's always this aspect of like sci-fi to it that really puts like an interesting spin to the stories. Immaculate Conception was no different. This book is about 2 girls who go to this like prestigious art school, and it's kind of that typical story where like one comes from a poor, less fortunate family, and then the other is like very wealthy, very fortunate. But I will say their characters felt a little bit different than some of the other like stories that I've read with this premise, because the girl that came from the unfortunate background, I mean, besides, yes, her family being kind of like poorer, her parents weren't as supportive of her as an artist. Overall, she's lived like a pretty decent life. The girl that came from a wealthy family has all this artistic talent, is actually the one who has like lost both her parents, really going through it, dealing with some serious mental hardships. And that aspect is actually what like the premise of their relationship is based on a little bit. So they both end up leaving the school, leading these artistic careers, and the like more unfortunate girl, I forget their names right now, but she ends up marrying this like tech billionaire and supporting this project that he's been working on that essentially helps you connect your brain to another human and be able to bear their traumas, their hardships, their depression for them in a kind of like minute way, so that both of you so that you can handle it and take away some of their pain, while they're also able to like process easier and like work through their traumas a little easier. So that's kind of where like the sci-fi techie aspect comes from. So when her wealthy friend, who she's like infatuated with, is going through this really, really tough time in life, she decides to do this for her and connect their brains. And so then you kind of get to follow their story, because as she's able to tap into her brain and like, you know, dive in there and help her work through some of her trauma, she's also able to essentially create art from the brain of her friend. And because she has always felt like her art isn't as good and she doesn't have all this like artistic talent that her friend does, she kind of starts to take advantage of that. So I think once you get to that part of the book is when things start to get very interesting but messy and a little bit dark and twisted, and you really start to like dive deeper into the author's intentions of like questioning like, you know, authorship, creativity, individualism, and like the privacy of our minds. I really liked it. I personally did like Natural Beauty more, but still I did feel like this was like such an engaging read, and I love a book that kind of makes you think about like these greater issues that we have in real life, but in a very kind of almost like fantastical way. It almost feels like it's like the dystopian way of thinking about it, because like, you know, we don't have this kind of technology in our world, but what if we did? What then will be like the main issues when it comes to creativity and artistry. So I do work with Aardvark as well, and each month I get to pick out a few books to add to my collection. So what I've been trying to do is actually like ordering and picking my books based on genres and categories. In January, for some reason, I was just craving some good romances. So the 3 books that I picked out were Unromance by Erin Connor, Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and then also Perfect Fit by Claire Gilmore. I haven't read Perfect Fit yet. I felt like after these 2, I kind of needed a break from romance, but the first one I read was Unromance. This is your stereotypical rom-com. And I mean, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a rom-com book, but man, this book was so meta when it came to rom-com books because it talks about Sawyer, who is a author of rom-com or like romance books, who meets this actor Mason, and they meet in a very typical meet cute situation. They get stuck in an elevator together, but what's interesting and what's meta about this book is that Sawyer, the romance writer, actually has gone through this like major breakup and is feeling really, really jaded. So she has all this inner dialogue about their meet cute and, like as their relationship develops, that really is just her thinking to herself all the time, oh my God, this is so stereotypical. Look at this meet cute. Look at the way that he's acting. Romance, blah, blah. Like, it's just interesting because you're reading a romance book. It's about a romance author. She hates love. But then there's this man who loves love, and the romance author is trying to prove to the man who loves love that love is not that great. That's the premise of the story. So after their elevator meet cute, they end up having a one-night stand and then kind of promising each other like, okay, this is all I needed from you. But then they keep bumping into each other and they end up deciding like, okay, maybe like we can just hang out and like keep it super cash. And so they devise this plan where he is going to like take her on these like romantic dates, hoping to help her like reignite her desire to write because she's kind of been on this like writer's block, and she's gonna try to spoil these romantic plans for him and show him that romance is dead and that really it's not that great. So I think we can all see where that story is going. It was good. I did enjoy it. I got out of it what I needed. I will say one of my comments about it was that maybe we just like thought about sex a little too much in this book. I'm game with a little bit of smut in a book and a little bit of, passionate romance, but I just feel like this felt almost like too unrealistic. It's like, okay, yes, I get it. They're very attracted to each other. They want to hook up, but did we need to be thinking about sex all the time? The other romance book that I read was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This I actually really enjoyed. Except I do have a comment about the smut in this as well, which we'll get to. But Bride talks about a vampire who is set up to marry her biggest rival, or like her species' biggest rival, the head of the werewolves. So Misery the vampire is the daughter of the most powerful man on the vampire council, and it feels like much of her life has been kind of like dedicated in trying to like help the vampire council just like win bids and win favors. So when her dad proposes that she should marry the alpha of the werewolves, Lo, she kind of initially is like, there's no freaking way. But then something happens, he says something, and she's like, wait a second, say his name again? Lo. And so right away you kind of get that feeling, okay, like she has something else that she's focused on. She has an ulterior motive here. So she agrees to marry Lo, and yeah, you kind of just get to like experience their lives as her as a vampire, living in the werewolf territory, and like how everyone reacts around her. Their relationship. She thinks that he just thinks that she stinks. Wow, that was hard to say. She's really scared that he thinks that she stinks because she's of this other species, and she's trying to be like considerate while also trying to follow her own ulterior plan that she has going on. It's a classic enemies to lover. We know it. We love it. So my note about the smut in this book, I don't think it was too much smut. I think it was just enough smut. It was like, passion when it was time for passion, which is great. However, what I didn't need to know was the detailed anatomical experience of mating as a wolf. If you've read this book, you'll know what I'm talking about, or if you know about the mating ritual of wolves, you might know what I'm talking about, but I just felt like it was a little unnecessary. There was some spicy talk in the book that I was like, okay, I'm a little disturbed. I'm not gonna lie. I just feel like, I understand what she was trying to do here. Obviously, this is a factorial detail about the mating ritual of wolves, but it's like, it's a fantasy book. Like, we could have kept that out of it. We could have just made their reproductive systems more human instead of having it be very anatomically correct to the wolf species. That's all I gotta say. Despite that, I still really enjoyed the story because that only really happens like in the last 20 pages of the book. So I'm like, oh, thank God I didn't have to like read this throughout the book and hear all the spicy talk. That was very disturbing. But yeah, that's Bride. I have been back on my nonfiction game lately, so I've been trying to read a little bit of nonfiction every single morning just to get my brain stimulated and have as a part of my morning routine. So the book that I finished in January was The E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. This is such a must read for anyone who has ever thought about being an entrepreneur, starting a small business, even if you're planning to be like a freelancer, a contractor, just anyone with their own business. Read this. This was so good. When you look at the book, it looks very serious. It looks a little stuffy. It almost looks like a textbook. However, what I didn't realize when I was going in is how much this book would deep dive into like alignment between your life goals and your business goals and how to really build a business that helps you achieve your life goals. Not a lot of business books that I've read tackle that specific subject, which I think is a mistake because I do think that in order for us to be intrinsically motivated to grow our businesses, to continue to innovate in our businesses, we need to have it align with what's going on in our lives. And so when I look at this book, I really would not expect that it would cover that, but it covers that so well. And it really helps to create such an actionable plan around that. So I loved this book. It's one that I'm going to keep on my shelf and kind of refer back to when I'm going through things, because really this is like a workbook. Like it gives you the step-by-step guide to how to properly build a business. So I refer to it honestly like weekly as I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing with my little startup and my business. So yeah, it was good. I really, really enjoyed it. In audio format, I actually listened to The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I had canceled my Audible subscription, but right before I canceled, I had some credits to use up. So I think I just saw it on the homepage and I was like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to read that. So I downloaded it and I've been listening to it like on my drives to the city. It was so good. This is like peak literary fiction, like truly peak messy woman, messy thoughts, tackling some of those more intense and dark aspects of the human brain and the human life in the most beautiful prose ever. It was stunning. The Bell Jar talks about a girl who has always kind of struggled like mentally. She ends up having this like month-long internship in New York and she enjoys it, but she kind of feels like she can't find her footing and doesn't know where she fits in. I think that she's, in her early 20s, which is why this is going on. So she, is like trying out friend circles, trying on different like personalities and the way that she sees herself. And so after this internship, it's summertime, it's time for her to go home, and she has this like writing program that she was hoping to go to. She doesn't end up going to the writing program, and so she sinks into this really deep depression, starts having thoughts about unaliving herself. So it does get quite dark in that portion. And after a really scary and dark and unfortunate incident where she does kind of like try to unalive herself, her mom commits her to an institution. And so the like latter half of the book is really just her like trying to, I guess, like help herself and trying to learn, but also not, because she's like, I don't know if anyone can fix me. And you just get to kind of follow her story as she is like healing from this incident, but also as she's trying to like work through these different aspects in her brain. The reason it's called the bell jar is because the way that she like visualizes her depression and how she's feeling is like as if there's this big bell jar on top of her, and it's always like kind of floating right on top of her head, and sometimes it'll descend and just like cover her entirely, so it almost feels like she's in this like void, and it's a void of like negativity and sadness and just like everything that's glum. It just surrounds her and like locks her within it. I thought that that was such an interesting like visual when it comes to thinking about depression, anxiety, and just your like mental health struggles, because it's like a very accurate way to think about it. It does really sometimes feel like you're trapped in like this bubble, and it just feels heavy and like damp and like uncomfortable in there, but you don't know how to get out. So without spoiling it, you do kind of get to see like her character arc as she works through some of these things. I don't know, it was just good. It was just an easy 5 out of 5. It was so well written. It is, again, peak literary fiction, and I think that if you like lit fic, and maybe if you've like read a little bit of contemporary lit fic already just to like get your toes wet, I would highly recommend reading The Bell Jar. I think it is fantastic. The last book that I read in January was The Songbird and the Heart of Stone, which is book 3 of the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. I feel like I've been waiting for this book for so long because I loved The Serpent and the Wings of Night and I forget the name of the second book. Oh my God. Something and the Star-Cursed King, I think. They are still some of my favorite like romantasy books that I've read so far. And so I kind of went into like The Songbird with really high hopes, and I will say that they did meet those expectations. Like it was really good, and you get to really dive into a different part of the Crowns of Nyaxia world. So how the Crowns of Nyaxia series works is that it is a 6-book series, 7 if you include the novella. But the way that Broadbent had wanted to structure this was that there are like 3 different vampire families in this world, and they all kind of have their own unique powers. So she split the 6-book series into 3 parts. So it's like a trilogy in a sense. And then within each of those 3 parts, you have a duology. So the first 2 are about one kind of like vampire family. The second 2, which starts with The Songbird and the Heart of Stone, is about the House of Shadows, I think it's called. So it's all about like dark magic, the underworld. Like there's a lot of those aspects in it, which I found incredibly interesting to read, because you just never really get many books that like dive deep into like the underworld and like spirits and like the different gates of hell, which she calls something different, but it was like very well written. So although I didn't love The Songbird as much as I loved the first 2 books, I would say like the first 2 books were easy 5 out of 5s for me. I still really enjoyed it. It was like really just like a 4.5 out of 5 maybe. It was still amazing, so well written. I loved the premise. I loved the story. One of the characters from the first 2 books is actually one of the main characters in this book. So it talks about how she gets saved by one of the princes of the House of Shadow, and he is actually the Wraith. I want to say Wrangler, but that isn't it. The Wraith Warden, not Wrangler. Although, yes, he wrangles wraiths, but he's called the Wraith Warden because his kind of like life mission is to help people pass along the underworld, help keep it intact and all of that. And so it's about their relationship and a mission that they have to accomplish, in which they can only do if they go through these like gates of the underworld and get to the very end to help like accomplish this mission. It all kind of happens in this underworld. There's like necromancy. There is so much going on. And yeah, it was really, really good. I'm not really sure, honestly, why it didn't hit the way that the first two books did, but I think that when the next book comes out, so the second one of this part of the 3-part series, it will probably make me like this portion better. Maybe it's just because like their story is unfinished right now, so I'm getting that itch to like finish their story. I think that the 4th book of the Crowns of Nyaxia series is supposed to come out this year, so really looking forward to reading that. But yeah, that was the last book that I read in January. I don't think that I'm going to be reading 8 books again in February, but let me know if you want me to do a February monthly wrap up as well. And also let me know what your favorite book was that you read from January. That's all I have for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed. Other than that, I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!